Hi everyone, welcome back to the Bible Explained. Let us continue reading in Genesis. We are now in chapter 2, reading from verse 1 through verse 25. Life in God's Garden. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, before any plant of the field was in the earth, and before any herb of the field had grown. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the earth. But a mist went up from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became 4 riverheads. The name of the first is Pishon. It is the one which skirts the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and the onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one which goes around the whole land of Cush. The name of the third river is Hiddekel. It is the one which goes toward the east of Assyria. The fourth river is the Euphrates. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. And the Lord God said, It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So Adam gave names to all cattle, to the birds of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Okay, let's review what we just read. The first verse in Genesis chapter 2, we see that God has finished all of his creation by day 7, and that he rested and sanctified day 7. The only thing that has not been created yet are people. In Hebrew, that word sanctified is kadas, meaning to consecrate, to be separate, or to be holy. Now all of creation in the heavens, which is space and where God is, including the earth, are complete, which would mean everything that we can and can't see are complete, including the spirit beings, such as angels. The question I would ask is, why consecrate day 7? Well, for God to be God, he would have to be all-knowing And he has set this day of sanctification in order before man is even created. However, sanctification was set after the creation of angels. What we can take away is that we as God's people must rest from our work in following suit of God. We rest so we can work, and not work so we can rest, which is pretty much how society today runs. We're working so hard it seems progress is so unreachable, and we do very little rest. As we continue reading, we see that God has not caused it to rain on the earth, which is very key to point out that all vegetation receives its water from the ground and not by the clouds. If it was to ever rain on the earth, it would be by God's hand, and we all know how the worldwide flood came into place, which we will get into much later in this particular book. This also gives us a clue as to why Noah's own siblings thought he was crazy when he warned them about God flooding the earth. There were no oceans nor earthquakes causing tsunamis or platonic shifting until the flood came. So to everyone, a catastrophic flood by water was impossible. There were only seas with larger deposits of land. There are many subterranean chambers of water deep within the earth, and that is how vegetation was replenished in those days. And today we still have those chambers deep within the earth. In verse 7, we see Adam formed from dust and became a living being once God breathes life into him. If we go back to Genesis chapter 1, we read that the earth was only made of water, and shortly after God fashions the land. So the dust of the land is of water, which we scientifically know that a large percentage of our body is made of water. In verse 8, God plants the Garden of Eden and places Adam there for a few reasons. For one, Adam witnesses God's creative work happening right before his eyes when it comes to Adam selecting a helper, because it is not good for man to be alone. And this makes perfect sense. The fact that we are made in God's image, and God is love, and love cannot be expressed alone. Love itself is the outward expression of God. And so, as Adam sees God creating the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, he understands who is responsible for the world he is created into. Most people confuse Genesis chapter 2 and chapter 1 as a contradiction, that God created the animals on day 5, and yet we see more animals being created the same day God creates Adam in the garden. There's no contradiction. This is a separate and imperative creation act of the same living creatures we see from day 5 for Adam to witness and understand what he will have dominion and authority over as he tends and keeps the Garden of Eden, including the entire earth. Another reason is to notice God's true intent and purpose for mankind on the earth, and God tells us by defining the 4 names of each riverhead that comes from Eden. First is Pishon, which means increase, and there was an abundance of gold there. The second is Gahan, which means bursting forth. The third is Hadelko, which means rapid, and the 4th river is Euphrates, which means fruitfulness. So basically, God put man in the garden of increase, which bursting forth rapid fruitfulness, which is just beyond amazing. Not only was Adam going to have all of this, but he was alone. And in verse 22, God causes Adam to go into a deep sleep to obtain his rib to fashion the woman, his wife. If we look up the word rib in the Hebrew, it means curved. And now Adam is very satisfied in obtaining his helper and not the other living creatures. A few things to take away from this chapter is that God created a world for man to have complete dominion over the earth, an earth that springs forth wealth and continuous blessings, a world that consists of angels who are subject to God and man, and also that it is best for a man to have someone to share all these things with and not be alone. Not just to have anybody, but someone who can be called your husband or wife, fulfilling the empty void by the one flesh union of a male and female.